Facilitation skills, introduction to the best and worst practices. We'll dive into things that you might want to think about adding to your practice and things that you might be doing that you might want to curb or address or avoid if you're not falling victim to some of these bad practices.
Key skills and areas of focus for you when it comes to effective facilitation are clear communication, active listening, fostering participation, and then maintaining neutrality. At the top here, you've got that active listening, which allows you to really be clear on what's happening in the room, leaning in, being present in what's in that space, and also making sure that that's what you're setting up with participants as well, that they're actively listening to each other. Clear communication is where you're really making sure that you're clear with your participants about what the purpose is of the gathering, what activities are going to happen, and the steps and prompts that are going to take place. Fostering participation is really about making sure that you're creating the right environment where people want to lean in, they want to engage, they're excited about what's happening. This is where you can do things like celebrating wins, also encouraging multiple voices to participate, and then recognizing what can happen when that takes place. Maintaining neutrality is really about making sure that you're entering into this space as the facilitator at the right vantage point, that you're there to guide conversation, you're there to guide the activities based on your role. Oftentimes that means that you're not going to be entering in your opinion, you're there to guide the process, and so you want to make sure you're in that space. If you're not a neutral party, if you're somebody who is internal to the organization, well, then you just want to make sure that you're really clear on what position or what hat you're wearing in that facilitated gathering.
That's a great point. And as an internal facilitator, or even someone who's just bringing facilitation skills to a meeting, it's important to note that while you're not truly neutral, you want to think about how you lean into the other skills around fostering engagement and making sure you're active listening and you're not pushing your ideas onto people too aggressively. You have to balance this space of like providing your ideas, but also creating space for others to provide ideas. And to bring home the active listening piece, it's really about asking questions that help you clarify and understand the intent and what folks are sharing. And so instead of taking the time when someone else is speaking to think about what you might do next or how you might prompt the next activity or how you're going to synthesize what they're saying, take the time to listen. What is a good follow-on question? What is something that might help you better understand what they're saying? Even taking the time to write down what they're saying, whether it's paraphrasing or not, on the mural board or on the wall, can help you with those active listening skills.
On the flip side, there are some worse practices, things that you need to make sure you avoid when it comes to facilitation if you really want to have the impact that you're hoping for. This starts from the beginning. So we oftentimes find that folks will do poor prep, poor design. They won't put time into their agenda design and thought into what needs to be in place in order to reach those purposes and outcomes they're hoping for. So lack of prep, really want to make sure that you do the flip and put in some key focus and time into your preparation. That then leads into another worst practice that we've seen, which is not adhering to time or poor time management when it comes to your facilitation. So you have time chunks set up, hopefully you do. That would be a first step in your prep. But if you have those in place, that you really have an eye to where you are time-wise based on your purpose, and you adjust accordingly, because activities can easily run over the time that you have set or run under, and then you're scrambling. So always making sure you have an eye to that and you're flexible in adjusting based on your purpose. Another couple of worst practices that we'll oftentimes see come up during sessions is facilitators dominating the conversation. So you're there to create the space for others to shine, to actualize the best in those teams and hear their voices. Really, you need to be judicious about how much you're going to enter in. So make sure that you're focusing on what people there have to add, and you're listening to them and getting curious and setting up others to get curious with them versus you dominating that space. And then finally there, and this is connected to that dominating piece, not keying into what participants are saying or what they're offering up. So you need to be present as a facilitator, listening into what participants are offering up and building from there, building connections from there, and really making sure that you're present in what folks are offering. You're just there to create the space.
One thing that underlies all of those worst practices is not being clear on your purpose. You can't plan well if you haven't aligned on your purpose. And oftentimes I'll hear, especially for internal meetings, that people might be facilitating, well, I don't have enough time to plan. Well, if you get clear on your purpose, then you might have time to plan, because you might realize that, hey, this is a really important purpose that we're adhering to. So let's make sure we take the appropriate time to plan for it and make sure we get those good outcomes. Another thing, as far as taking the time to plan, maybe you don't have to perfect it the first time. If it's an ongoing thing or there's some flavor of it that you keep repeating, then take a little bit of time to plan and then think, how did that go? How do I need to plan for the next one? And so you can slowly accumulate these best practices and better designs as you go. So think about how you can clarify that purpose so that you know how to plan better. Think about how much time that you can allocate, and just allocate what you can so that you can continuously be improving, even though it might not be perfect out of the gate.
Some key techniques that you can use here are open-ended questions, really making sure that you're posing questions to the group that have multiple different ways that people can respond, instead of those closed-ended questions that only end up being a yes or no. This is where you can really open things up, make sure you're posing queries to folks that end up having multiple different ways that people could respond. Also, pausing and summarizing for the group can be a really powerful practice and technique. So making sure that you're slowing down, noticing aloud. Oftentimes I like to think about what's coming up in terms of ideas, checking in with the group as to, what I'm noticing, is that right? Do these ideas tie together, or is this theme that I'm seeing really coming up, and that then turns it back over to the group? That's also a form of some more open-endedness there, where you could go to different new points in that conversation. And then also using tools like sticky notes, whether that would be on a mural or mural board or even up in the room. That allows you to modularize ideas, make them movable, right? So when we see all these ideas up there, we can then make connections and themes, synthesis in ways that we wouldn't if it was just either in our heads or on a list that we're sharing with each other.
There's a few things to consider when it comes to questions. There's a book called A More Beautiful Question that I couldn't recommend more highly. Definitely go check that out. And we also created a download that you can find at voltagecontrol.com/downloads called The Facilitator's Guide to Questions. It's full of great little prompt starters and little phrases that you can use, such as, tell me more about that, or what did you mean by X? Or what kind of X do you mean? It can be really great at getting to move past metaphor when people are using jargon and it might not be clear, because we want to help the group get to that understanding and that alignment, and how we draw folks in. Definitely think about how you craft those questions and spend some time on that. So it's so critical, and it can have big impacts on how you facilitate.
When managing group dynamics as a facilitator, there are some key things for you to pay attention to. First off, you're oftentimes going to have some more active voices that can end up dominating a group. And so you really want to make sure that you are attending to that, both through your planning, through making sure that you've set up some pop-up rules or commitments for the group that are connected to equal airtime, and then you're continuing to be aware of and checking in with the group. Hey, are we hearing from everybody on this? Or I'm hearing a lot from this side of the room. I'd love to hear a little bit more from this side of the room. That can help to manage what could be more dominating or domineering voices. On the flip side, when it comes to quieter voices or folks who are a little bit more reticent to speak up, again, those pop-ups are really key. Awareness of what's happening in the room and voices and equal airtime. And then also making sure that you are putting together activities that give people who may be a little more reticent to speak up in front of the group multiple ways to engage and warm up into that space. So an activity we love to use is 1, 2, 4, all. gives those quieter folks an initial solo reflection opportunity to really touch into where they are on a topic. They then warm up into talking with a partner about that prompt, and then into the group of 4 there, and then to the whole group. So that gives people an opportunity to warm up into that space and make it to where they're able to ultimately share with each other and balance the voices across the room.
Having a set of prompts in your prompt library is a great tool to be able to counter some of these things. So for instance, saying things like, who haven't we heard from, when there's an overtalker or when there's some quiet folks? Are there other perspectives that might help us get to a better solution? If someone's talking a ton, saying things like, well, certainly Bob has a lot to say on this. What does anyone else have to say? We can redirect some of those things. We can even celebrate a lot of the contributions, but then really encourage others to lean in and contribute as well. So there's little ways that we can redirect and reflect and move on, even making sure we're capturing what people say. Sometimes people repeat things and say them a lot because they don't feel they're being heard, and so we write them down and make sure they're displayed on sticky notes. It's a lot easier for people to see that and accept that what they're saying has been accepted and heard. And finally, I'll say this, Eric talked a bit about 1, 2, 4 all, and there's other ways of doing small group or partner kinds of conversations. And that can be a great way of having someone who's not quite as engaged or a little more quiet. Their ideas might still be infectious, and so they might speak up more in a small group conversation, and then others in that group might elevate their ideas for them. So that can be really powerful.
Difficult dynamics will oftentimes come up in our work, and being able to navigate those with calm and poise are really key. And we've mentioned this in prior videos. Oftentimes you can have more disruptive participants or domineering participants. Your ability to address that hinges on how you set up that space and the planning you put into place, making sure those pop-up rules are there, that you've talked about conflict before it happens. It's really key, and how the group is going to navigate it before it actually takes place is really important. So then once a disruptive or more domineering voice comes into play, you can point both them and the group back to those agreements and the overall purpose there. Technique I oftentimes like to use in that situation is just naming and noticing. Hey, I'm noticing so-and-so saying this thing, or I'm noticing you say this thing or that thing. That's really going against many of the commitments that we had set up there. And so I'd like to remind everybody to reorient to that space, which is really, really, really important. Also too, then you have just navigating conflict in general. One thing that's really key here for navigating conflict or disruptive situations is to remain calm as a facilitator. So ways that we oftentimes will work with folks on remaining calm is tapping back into their breath, feeling their feet on the ground in a situation where there's heightened emotion. So just pausing, taking that breath, slowing things down a little bit, not speeding up with the conflict, but instead taking that breath, slowing things down. That's where you can name and notice. If you're unsure of how you're going to respond, just that naming and noticing can slow things down just enough that can give you a place to pause and regroup before you decide what direction you're going to go. Also too, in that breath and that feeling your feet on the ground, you can ask the whole group to pause and say, hey, I'm noticing that things are getting too heated here for this initial conversation. I'd like us to just pause and either take a break, or we're going to do a little bit of writing here before we re-engage. I'd like you to remind everybody here of our pop-ups, of the agreements, of the ways that we wanted to handle conflict, plus that purpose that we had focused on. And that's really going to help you then navigate the conflict that's at play. One last thing here that I want to highlight about conflict is that conflict in and of itself, people shy away from because it's uncomfortable, it's messy. They have legacies of conflict that they bring into the space and how they've managed that. Conflict can actually be a good thing. It can be a good indicator of you having different viewpoints in the room, that people are feeling comfortable sharing those differing viewpoints, and also that you might be on the verge of a breakthrough, both in terms of innovation and also potentially for relationships there, because as groups navigate conflict together, they're your relationships get stronger.
I'd like to expand on a few things Eric mentioned, and one of them is, he mentioned the breath and the feet on the ground. Learning how to recognize the signals in your body is really powerful, because if in conflicted moments your body starts to send you signals, that can create a fight or flight kind of scenario, and that could be a really hard moment to navigate if you haven't identified those feelings in your body and associated to them those feelings, those understandings. And so it's taking time just to take inventory of, like, does your head start to swell? Like, if you start to notice those things, what would be appropriate responses in that moment so that you can stay calm? You can recognize these are external conditions having impact over me. I'm going to take control here, and I'm going to lean in. And the labeling piece Eric mentioned, like when you're noticing those things, you could actually say, I'm feeling some tension. Does anyone else feel that as well? So then you're taking these noticings about your feelings and what's surfacing in your body and asking the rest of the group. And you might get some folks jumping in and saying, yeah, it was kind of rude what Rob said. And then now you don't even have to label that behavior as rude. Someone else is jumping in to do that. And then the rest of the group saying, yeah, it was kind of rude. And then Rob apologizes. And it kind of sorts itself out. And so just taking a moment to point out what you're feeling and see if anyone else agrees. If it gets really, really tense, and this is something to be mindful of, is your responses shouldn't go beyond the scope of the conflict. And so if it's a small conflict or a small nuisance, you don't want to have a big response, right? But if it is something of a great magnitude, you might say something like, hey, I think given what just happened, it would be good for us to all take a break. Let's reconvene in 15 minutes. And then you can use the break time to confer with someone who might need a little assistance because something was said to them that was inappropriate or what have you. Very, very powerful. And the last thing I'll say is that if you take the time to consider that everyone in the room is really rooting for you. Rarely are you walking into a situation where people want you to fail. And so if you keep in mind that when things get a little rough, or you get a little shaky and you feel like you're on the tightrope and you're like, am I going to be able to stay up here or am I going to fall? Very rarely are people hoping that you fall. And so if you keep that in the back of your head and say, hey, they're not out to get me, then it's much more likely that you're not going to become self-conscious and you can step in front of it and with grace and recover easily.
Real key part of your continued growth is a focus on regular improvement and a focus on reflection, reflective practice in your work. So first off, really key for you to make sure you are regularly practicing, especially practicing those things that you may not be as good at, may want to grow in, and are stepping back and reflecting on that practice. How is it going? What's working? What's not working? What do you want to improve? In that process, seeking out feedback from folks that you really value, making sure that you are asking people to watch your facilitation, gathering feedback from groups after you've done a session, and then using that to guide, here's what I want to practice more on, or here's what I want to grow in. And that can then help you be a lot more deliberate about not only what you're going to be bringing into sessions and working on and keying into, but also where you're going to focus your training. So that's another place where it's so key. I think too often facilitators and leaders just continue to get work because they were able to execute before, but really just stay at this plateau because they're not investing in their own professional development. And so based on where you're wanting to grow, seek out additional training opportunities, workshops, certifications, areas that you can be supported and with a group of people who are going to support your growth in the areas that you've identified.
Fantastic place to practice and hone your skills is at the Facilitation Lab community that we founded and we run. There are plenty of opportunities virtually to practice every other week, as well as regional meetups all around the globe that you can lean into. And finally, if you want to really lean in to your growth, we offer a certification program that's 3 months long, so I encourage you to check it out.
In conclusion, we just went over the key best and worst practices that you can use as a facilitator, as a leader in your work. Things like, for the best, making sure you are engaging in active listening, really seeking out the experiences and contributions of the folks that you're working with, really making sure that you put time into planning, all key parts of those best practices that lead to effective facilitation. While on the flip side, worst practices like dominating the conversation as a facilitator, poor planning, poor time management that can ultimately undermine where you're hoping to go. And finally, we outlined how important it is for you to make sure you're investing in your own growth through regular reflective practice, making sure that you've identified where you want to grow, making sure you're continuing to work on that, gathering feedback from voices that you trust, and then continuing to invest in professional development like our facilitation certification program and our workshops and other trainings out in key practice areas that you want to grow in.
Thanks for tuning into this video and learning about facilitation skills and how to do them well, how to avoid the bad things. Really encourage you to take some time to adopt these skills and spend time honing them, because it is such a transformative practice that you can have in your organization, whether you're wanting to instill more innovation or you're wanting to just get better teamwork and better collaboration on your team. So thanks for watching the video, and I hope you stick with it.